Ready to
Assalamu
start.
alaikum. So thank you everybody for joining us for the question and answer session. So we have two ways that we can submit questions. We can do it the old-fashioned way, just raise your hand and we'll get to you in the order that I see you. We can bring a mic to you so that way everybody can hear. Or if you're feeling a little bit shy, we've done Menti before in the center. So you can go to your phone and go open up a browser and go to menti.com and it'll ask you for a code and you just put in the code and the question will appear over here for me. I'll do a little bit of filtering just to make sure which question, so then I will ask the question and I'll keep an eye on it. I've got it over here. So anybody want to be the brave person who gives us our first question?
I will do the ice break. I don't think I need a mic.
You're competing with the fireworks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
The most common question that I hear from our youths these days is with whatever is going on in the Middle East, particularly in Palestine, where is Allah? And I know this is a very common question and I'm sure you have come across. So if we could start with that, please. Thank you.
You know, I cannot answer on behalf of Allah, of course, but I believe that in Allah's justice, and that justice works through time in different ways, whereby, otherwise Allah would have to interfere in every calamity or tragedy that occurs. Where was Allah, you can ask, during the Holocaust, for example, or so many tragedies, or even in Karbala that have occurred. But we do know, or we do believe in God's justice, and then in the final analysis, the truth will surface, and those who are perpetrating these acts of injustices will be held accountable and will suffer. So, for example, in the Quran, and we know historically, there have been so many empires which were even greater than what we see now, who thought that they could not be touched, that they were the great superpowers, and yet today, they've all fallen by the wayside. So yes, there's a lot of tragedy, there's a lot of, there's a war crimes being committed, genocide being done in Gaza. But it is, Allah doesn't come down on earth. And then He can ask us also that you Muslims, you have so much power, you have so much influence, how come you did not do anything? To me, it is ironic that the only country in the world which has actually taken Israel to court is who? South Africa. It's a non-Muslim country, let's face it. Allah can say, well, I've given you all the powers, I've given you all the wealth, and how come you guys did not do anything? You could have. And in many ways, it puts us to shame as Muslims, I'm talking of. There's very few countries which have actually spoken out or actually done anything, Iran being one of them, and a few factions here and there. So it's also, the onus is up to us too.
Okay, I've been sent a question to ask. This is not my question, but where is it? Okay, so if interpretations of poems, books, etc. varies, and you said that even the scriptures have different interpretations, which is okay because it is an individual's opinion, don't you think it creates divisions within the circle of followers? And if so, what is the best approach to discuss various interpretations and knowing that there may also be a risk of misguidance?
Of misguidance? This is a very common phenomenon in all religions, nothing peculiar to Islam, whereby people discuss, they interpret things differently. But first of all, there are principles of interpretation. It's not an individual person coming with my reasoning says this. You can't do that. There is the history, if you're looking at the Quran, there is what is called asbabun nuzul, meaning the occasions of revelation. Why was a particular verse revealed? In what context? And from there we can derive certain principles of what it means. However, there is always the possibility that some people may disagree. People may disagree on a particular word, what it may mean at a particular time, of what context it was in. That's where we have differences. What I was trying to say is that we cannot impose our interpretation on others because one mujtahid says this or one mufassir says this, therefore that's the only one and possible interpretation or one and only possible truth. Yeah, there are going to be, and there are still until today, many a time you want to do something, especially in mu'amilat, that is social transaction, you often hear, whose taqleed you are doing. Why do we do that? Because mujtahids do differ amongst themselves. On the basics, they will not differ. On the salat, for example, or fasting, they are all the same opinion. But there are those who will say something different, who will opine something different. For example, there are those who will say today that the time for Maghrib is actually at sunset, the way that the Sunnis pray. Whereas the majority who will say that it is you have to wait 10 minutes is based on ihtiyat, on precaution, because there are traditions which say the opposite. So many a time there is a kind of a way of trying to resolve contradictions or conflicts or differences also. This by interpretation or by saying that it is better to be on the safe side, precaution, that we shall pray a few minutes later. But in the final analysis, we should always consult somebody who is an expert in the field on a particular issue.
Thank you, Sheikh. On this issue about the Maghrib namaz and Zohar namaz and all that, if we are at a Sunni masjid or Sunni gathering, what is our responsibility as to timing, and especially during Ramadan?
Yeah. On the question of prayers, especially with the Ahlul Sunnah, we are recommended to join them in prayers. We should not pray separately if we are in that mosque. Okay? Normally, Dhuhr time is almost the same. I don't know about here, but in most cases I found the main difference seems to arise at Maghrib time. And as I said, when I go to Makkah, for example, it's time for prayers. At Maghrib time, normally they will say the nawafil, that is voluntary prayers. And by the time they finish the voluntary prayers, or what we call mustahabbat, it's time for namaz anyway, for us. So we can pray with them. But if you find, for example, that it's too early and it's not yet time for our prayers, you can pray with them, qadha, and then pray the wajibat.
I had a question about when you were speaking earlier about like the feelings of isolation that come from being between like a more Western liberal community and a more religiously conservative community. And I was wondering what your advice is on how to kind of reconcile those two identities, or like staying in between, like kind of gray area.
So I don't quite, I got the complete question about two identities.
Between being like a more Western, like American society versus like the more like conservative religious society.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Where do you draw the line? As I've said, I don't know whether you were here, all the majlises, I said that we cannot afford to isolate ourselves, but we cannot afford to assimilate ourselves either. We have to draw a line, a middle line, whereby we insulate ourselves. In other words, we empower ourselves religiously with the values, and then interact with the outside, but not be influenced or swayed by the outside. And that's not always easy, because many a time you're isolated from the West because they think you're not American enough, and you are isolated from your own community because they think you're too American. So it's a very tough challenge, and I think that many a time what does help is to have Muslim peers, because we can negate negative peer pressure with positive peer pressure, and that helps some of the isolation, if you like. Unfortunately, sometimes because we have so many divisions within the Muslim community or within the Shia community, that does not help. I mean, the sense of isolation, even at the university I teach, that many Shias are not welcome in the MSAs, Muslim Student Association, and therefore they end up forming their own Ahlul Bayt Association. In fact, I help them form it. But there are many cases where they don't have enough Shias to form their own. What do you do then? The moment they know that you are Shia, you are out. Now, I'm not saying that all of them are like that, but certainly many of the MSAs. So even at workplaces, I personally find, this is my experience, being a Shia Muslim in North America, and I've taught here in America and in Canada, I face more discrimination by fellow Muslims than by non-Muslims. I have faced. Some of you may feel the same. In other words, they target me, they say, oh, you Shia, you are out, and so on. They don't tell you directly on your face. But there are ways of doing it. My students have told me that they were told by MSA not to take my classes because Takim is not a mainstream Muslim. Which sounds ridiculous. I faced the same thing in Miami.
Why don't we go ahead and take some questions from...
Sorry. You'll have to speak up a bit because we're having...
Maybe it's the grand finale.
Oh my God. Maybe you should put it on Chat GPT.
Okay, so there's a question, how to detach from the world?
How do we detach
Detach
from the world?
from the world.
Why should we detach from the world? We do not need to detach ourselves from the world. Don't be so attached that you cannot detach. In other words, one day when we die, we'll have to detach. Sometimes we are so attached to money, for example, or for worldly things, that we feel we cannot detach ourselves. Sometimes of us, instead of us owning them, they own us. Instead of us possessing them, these worldly things, they possess us. That's where the danger lies. I hope are you hearing me? I can hardly hear myself. Oh my God. Okay. I hope you heard the madness today, because I didn't. So, yeah, we do not need to detach ourselves. But what we do need to have is a clear understanding that we cannot be so attached that we think that, we'll be with these goods of the world forever. وَخَدَتِ الدُّنْيَا بِغُرُورِهَا. Remember we said in Dua Kumair that the world has deceived me with its all illusions, etc. So yes, you can own things, but don't be so attached that one day you cannot detach yourself from that. But we don't need to detach ourselves from the world. We don't believe that you should be living in a monastery or something like that. We don't believe in monks.
Great, thank you. Let's take one more from here and then we'll go back to the floor. What's the best way to explain Muharram to a non-Muslim if the topic is brought up?
Well, that's an interesting question, yeah. To a non-Muslim or to a fellow Muslim? I think sometimes it's more difficult to explain it to the fellow Muslim than non-Muslim. But in any case, I think that we should explain to them, it's very difficult to do it without explaining the whole context of what it means, of what actually happened. Even briefly, that this is a mourning period for Muslims, at least for Shia Muslims, and what happened. And I think one of the things that people fail to understand is that why we remember it after so many years, over 1,000 years, because we were a persecuted minority for the longest period, to some degree even now. And it is this standing up to injustice, standing up to oppression, through the remembrance of Ashura and the events of Ashura, that we have kept our spirits, our values, everything that we have alive. Had it not been for Muharram, the Islam that the Prophet brought would have been definitely destroyed. Because these Umayyads, as I want to explain inshallah on the day of Ashur, basically violated all the principles. And Imam Hussein had to stand up, not because of himself, but because to keep alive those principles of the Prophet. Even the Salat had been destroyed. So I think we need to explain to non-Muslims that this, why do we hit ourselves? The reason is it's a symbolic way of saying no to injustice, saying no to oppression. Nobody likes to hit themselves, but we do it as a way of protest against injustices, against wrongdoing. And we find that injustice today. In fact, ironically, perhaps the people who've supported the people of Gaza most are the Shias. Let's face it. It's not only Iran, but Shias all over. They are burning and hurting because of what's happening in Gaza.
Dr. Takim, I just want to, if you don't mind, if I have your permission, to talk to the young man about his question for a minute.
Sure.
Because I honestly believe it is one of the most difficult stage of your life. I happen to know him, that's why I know he's just finished high school, he's about to go to college. Okay. And your answer was brilliant, because what Dr. Takim said is find peers you can align with. That is your best bet. Those peers may even be non-Muslims who share your values. Because really that's what matters. You cannot be isolated, you shouldn't be alone, and you should always be surrounded with people who will respect you for who you are, understand you for who you are, and appreciate you. So I hope, if you didn't mind, that I had to clarify to him,
appreciate.
because it was an excellent question. Okay,
No,
thank you.
because this is the formative period of people's character, by the way. And your friends can make you or break you in reality. In many ways, they will form who you are. Or yes, we've been given all this madrasa, parents have taught us, and so on. But in many cases, we are influenced by who are with us, a social atmosphere, social environment. So it's extremely, extremely important that we keep the right friends and the right people that we have with us.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Sheikh, I have many questions, but I think the most burning one that I have, I grew up in Pakistan, and there's a lot of propaganda growing up regarding the practices and the beliefs of Ahl Tashi. I just wanted some clarification on what the concept is for like the current version of Quran that we read every day. Is that according to the Shia belief, is that the correct version, or is there supposed to be a different version that was changed? Like, I just wanted some actual educational information on this. It's a confusing
Yeah,
topic.
the question is that of the Shia, the Quran, do we believe that this is the original Quran, or is there a different Quran? Because today everything is on the internet, okay? Let's be honest about it, and we don't have to and we should not lie. There are traditions in some of our books that the Shias had a different Quran, or that the current Quran has been changed a little bit here and there. Some of the verses were different. But in reality, those traditions and those books are not, they are weak books, basically. Excuse me. Can you hear me? They are weak traditions, books that we ourselves do not accept. So although we have to explain, especially with Ahlus Sunnah, that we do not have a book which is completely authentic the way that they do. For us, the only book which is 100% authentic is this Quran that we are reciting. And therefore, because if we say no, we don't have a different Quran, they'll come and bring us those traditions. So look, it's in your own books. But just because it's in our books does not mean that it's correct. We have very good criteria of deciphering, of differentiating between traditions. And one of the books that you might want to show them actually is written by Ayatollah Al-Khoui. Ayatollah Al-Khoui wrote a book which was translated into English by Dr. Sachadina. It's called The Prolegomena of the Quran. Prolegomena of the Quran should be available on Amazon now. Is the first chapter. He discusses the same issue. The question of, is there what we call tahrif? Tahrif means changes in the Quran. And it is ironic that they accuse us of having a different Quran. When you read their books, it says, for example, that Surah Al-Ahzab, Surah number 33, was longer than Surah Al-Baqarah. The longest surah in the Quran is Surah Al-Baqarah number 2. But they say Surah 33 was longer. So if that was longer, that means there are a few things that are missing. Another thing that is very famous, which is in their books too, that there was a verse about stoning. The Quran doesn't have a verse on stoning for adultery. The current Quran does not. But they said there was a verse, Az-Zaniya was-Zaniyahuma fajliduhuma, that farjuhuma, that stone them. And then that verse was kept under a pillow, and a goat came and ate that verse. It is in their books. We do not believe that. So, I don't mean that we should be attacking them, but we should explain to them that A, we don't believe there is another Quran. Secondly, that the idea of interpretation, interpolation is called, tahrif, changes is more in their books than in our books. They don't know this. A lot of them, they do not know a lot of the things which are in their own books. What we do believe is that Imam Ali alayhi salam compiled the Quran the way it was revealed, because the current Quran is not in chronological order. The Meccan surahs, that was the end, and the Medinan surahs, that was the beginning, most of them anyway. So we do believe that yes, there is a Quran which has the in chronological order, but the contents, the substance is the same.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I wanted to ask for your thoughts on this claim or idea that sometimes we as Shia Muslims put more importance on the lives and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the 12 Imams than we sometimes do on the lives and the teachings of the Prophet and the Quran.
So we put more emphasis on the Imams than on the Quran?
Yeah, what do you think about that, the idea that sometimes we do that?
I think that if, to be honest with you, there are two kinds of Shia Islam or Shiism, I see it. There is what we call a popular Shiism and the official Shiism. The official Shiism does not do that at all. Because when you look at the hadith of the Imams, they say that if you have a tradition, the first thing you do is compare it with the Quran. So the tradition is supposed to be compared with the Quran, not the Quran with the tradition. Is that clear? But there are those who sometimes have gone overboard in emphasizing. It's not that we're giving more importance, we emphasize the Imams, especially in our majalis. More than we talk more about the Imams than about the Quran itself, which the Imams would never approve of. Because the Imams themselves have told us that the first criterion, their main focus was Allah and the Quran. And therefore on the day of Ashur, Imam Hussein actually brings the Quran in front of his enemies. He says, don't judge me by what I say, judge me by this Quran. Have I violated, have I going against the Quran? It's a very clear statement that the Quran is the main scripture. Everything else that we do or we have should be measured by and against the Quran.
Dr. Kim, I just wanted to clarify further to the question the young man asked about the Quran. It wasn't clear to me. Is the Quran that we have right now, that the Sunnis believe in, that the Shias believe in, is that the authentic Quran, and do we believe it, or do we have problems with it?
We don't have problems with the Quran as it is now, okay? As I said, our the main difference is that the Quran is not compiled chronologically, which all Muslims will agree with. Whether Shia or Sunni, they will all agree it's not the Quran. Yes, we believe the content-wise is the same, and therefore we read it. There were a few traditions, and there are some alims who I don't even know would say, no, the real Quran is with the Imam. When he comes back, he'll bring it. But that's a very rare opinion. The majority, in fact, all the traditions will say that this is the Quran that was revealed, the way it was, and therefore we believe in this Quran.
Dr. Takim, I had a question. I heard you mention this first in the 90s and again today about how our youth can talk to kids, like girls can talk to Tom and Harry outside, but not to Ali and Jafar at mosque. I think it still applies here. How do you, have you seen any of the Jamaats do things differently that kind of aligns more with the needs of the youth right now?
Yes, I mean, I think that Jamaats have now gotten smarter. They're called smart Jamaat. Everything is smart and not so smart. So some of the Jamaat have actually arranged within the Sharia. We can arrange within the purview of the Sharia whereby boys can meet with girls and they can communicate, they can talk, as long as it is chaperoned properly. So some of them have done that. Now there are many Shia websites, by the way, I understand. I haven't gone on one of them, but there are quite a few Shia websites. What do they call it? Shia matching.com? I don't know. Shia match? I don't know how many of you have been there. But yeah, there are those. But it's not always easy to get. You see, the problem is that you have quite a few youth here, for example. And then you have youths in Tennessee or in Miami, and there's nothing which is connecting them. And quite a few of the youths are marrying outside. I should make it clear, I don't have a problem with marrying outside the community, as long as they come in and empower our youth. Many a time I find that they marry our youth and they actually take our youth away from us. That is where I have a problem. And yes, some Jamaats have organized it. You know, I think it's rather a travesty that something like Nasimco, which is supposed to serve us as a community all over North America, but most of the things they do is very administrative. You know, it's like a banker, take money and then transfer, whatever. But they are the ones who should be organizing this kind of North American meeting, if you like, for the youth, whereby the youth from different parts of North America. So if we have it in Toronto, it's only the Toronto youth are meeting each other. If you have it only here, then only the Los Angeles. But there are youths in so many different parts in North America. There are Shias in almost every North American city that you can think of. Even in Iqalut, in the tundra, there are. So we need to organize in such a thing, because just being on the website does help, I admit, but it doesn't do it completely.
Okay, I've got a couple of really good questions from the mentee for you. So the first one is, our marja.
Speak up a little bit.
Sure. Our marja have directed us not to dine at the same table where alcohol is being consumed. In today's society, alcohol is all around us and becoming difficult to avoid, especially at work environments. Even if one makes every effort to avoid being in such a situation, you might find yourself at the table with alcohol. What should we do in that situation?
One of the fiqh that we have, or jurisprudence, is called the fiqh of darura, necessity. We try and avoid as much as possible. But yes, I agree. I mean, I'm flying on Monday. Next thing I know is the guy next to me in the plane is consuming alcohol. What do? I can't get out of it. So many a time we are confronted with situations whereby we may not be able. Whenever we can, how much ever we can, yes, we keep away from it. But you're right, I mean, sometimes we have to go out with our colleagues. We are in a situation whereby we have to go to meetings and they serve alcohol. As long as we don't get tempted, even temptation is wrong, by that alcohol, we have to preserve our own identity and our values. Yeah, there are so many situations like with that. Like you go for an interview and then you meet the one who's interviewing you of the opposite gender. And he or she brings out his hand. And you know very well if you don't shake their hands, sometimes you could be rejected. In some cases, yes, you can just put your hand on your chest, you can greet them that way and they will understand. But not everybody understands that. This is what we call the fiqh of zarura, or of necessity. But we should not make a habit of it.
And then one more question. There's a couple of questions about this specifically, but pertaining to our responsibility in resisting the genocide as it pertains to both boycotts, so like boycotting companies that support the genocide, and then working at companies that provide aid to the oppressor. Like, how far are we obligated to go? Is it morally justifiable to work for an employer who supports Israel or supports practices that conflict with personal, ethical, or moral beliefs, especially when it's related to career growth and one's personal livelihood?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, we can talk against genocide. We can also boycott companies which support the genocide, or which support Israel, or even what's happening in the West Bank, the BDS movement. So we can certainly support those. But you're working for a company and suddenly it invests in stocks, or is actually, these are coming up now apparently. So if we are able to go and get another job, then we should do that. Because in no way should we lend our support at all to what is happening. Even if we are against it, but by working for the company, we are supporting it. However, I realize that it may not be possible to just leave a company. You have to get another job, because we all have to earn money. So as much as possible, if we can avoid it, then we should do that. I mean, we've had last year, if you recall, there was this encampment movement on many campuses, whereby students were actually against their own universities because of their investment in the support for Israel, if you recall. And you know what happened to many of those students. Unfortunately, a lot of things occurred. But as much as we can, I think we need to support them. You can only do whatever you can do.
Why did you become a Maulana?
That's an interesting question. Why did I become a Maulana? Very briefly, it's a long story, but I did not intend to. The opportunity arose for me to study in Virginia long before you were born, in 1981. So I started then in 1981, which is about 44 years ago. And one thing led to another. I mean, my main job is not reciting on the minbar. I teach in a university. I teach Islamic studies. I teach a wide range of courses, and that gives me a lot of satisfaction. But at the same time, the community, my community, has been very good to me. And I feel that if they ask me, if I'm needed, I'm always there for them. So I go to different centers, but I'm not, if you like, a professional Maulana.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
So I had a question regarding the Maraja, and using also like our logical sense. If we follow a particular Maraja, does that mean you follow them regardless of whatever they say? Or if something logically doesn't add up, or if there is a Maraja who gives a fatwa that makes more sense, logically speaking or Islamically speaking, can you follow them, or is it like a ride or die?
Yeah, you want a cafeteria Islam, pick and choose. No, I think that we have to first of all define taqleed. We seem to think that taqleed means following blindly any other person. That's not taqleed. Taqleed is to follow an expert in a particular field, in any field for that matter. If you follow an accountant, you follow a doctor, you're doing his taqleed. And taqleed, following a marja, is only in furu ad-din, which means following in Islamic law. So something which is, for example, a marja says, according to him, tafsir of a particular verse means that. So does it mean that we have to follow a marja because of his tafsir of the Quran? No, because tafsir is not furu ad-din. Tafsir is just an interpretation of the verse. Or a marja, for example, and I know this personally because I've talked to him, Ayatollah al-Khuy used to believe that Arba'een happened the same year, not after 1 year. In other words, the family were returned to Medina in the same year that they went to Damascus. He told me that himself. Now, historically, we said that no, it happened differently. Am I obliged to follow Ayatollah al-Khuy in that? No, because that's a historical issue. Do you understand? So, mostly the taqleed arises in issues like prayers, in fasting, in ibadat. And also in muamalat, also social contracts too. But there are cases whereby a marja may say something which we don't agree with. So for example, a marja may say that you can receive an organ from a non-Muslim, but you cannot give it to one. I personally have a problem with it, personally. In that case, there are maraja who say differently. Say, no, you can receive and you can give. So you can follow them in that particular fatwa. Because if somebody, your conscience says, no, this is something wrong here, how do we follow them? There are some who will argue, they will say that slavery is allowed even today, although we don't practice it, but because it's in the Quran, therefore it is allowed. I have problems with that too, although we don't practice it, of course, so it's a moot point. But just the idea, the concept itself is problematic.
Okay. How does one know that one is connecting to the divine? Is it through an increase in internal quietness or something else?
Yeah, I mean, it's an internal feeling. It's something that you have to experience rather than describe. But you feel a sense of peace, you feel a sense that you are praying to Him, and you hear a sense of voices coming to you many a time, or you feel the light many a time, or you feel inspired many a time. And that can happen either by prayers or recitation of the Quran or even meditation. So when you feel that spiritually enlightenment, shall we call it, you know that Allah is talking. Allah, as I said in one of my majlis, that have taqwa and Allah will teach you. That sense that you'll hear inner voices sometimes, or you'll feel inspired in many cases. You'll find that thoughts and words are coming out of you. You said, where did this come from?
Okay, here's another one. Today, some Sunni scholars are talking about Karbala and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, for example, Omar Suleiman. But they're not holding him at the same levels as we do. Should we commend this effort or reject it as not enough or inadequate?
See, we have to understand that the Sunnis love the Ahlul Bayt also. They will never say a word against the Ahlul Bayt because they are the family of the Prophet. They may not believe in the Ahlul Bayt that way that you and me do, that the whole idea of the Imamat is not acceptable to them. But at the same time, they will highly respect every member of the Ahlul Bayt, even Imam Hussein or especially Imam Hussein. They will never say anything against Imam Ali because he's a part of the Khulafa Rashidun. So we should explain to them, and yes, we should commend them for what they do. But at the same time, we should also explain to them what happened, why Imam Hussein took a stand. It is amazing that some Sunnis, very few, will go to the extent of actually praising Yazid. That Imam Hussein, na'udhu billah, was a rebel against Yazid. There was a narrative at the time of Karbala. And again, I think here is where the problem arises. That's where we need to shatter that narrative and change it. Unfortunately, history is written by the majority. And many times when the majority write history, they write it according to their way of looking at it. And I think that although most Sunnis that I know of will respect Ashura, I know of Sunnis will actually come to our mosque on the day of Ashura. If you go to India and Pakistan, they will actually join the Julus and condemn Yazid for what he has done. How long more do you want to go? I'm impressed by the turnout. I really am. I thought it would be me and Sadiq and a few others. That would be it.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is not profound or very deep, but it's an argument that occurs in my family and circle. So I'm hoping to get an answer. So when you're traveling, and I'm not talking about Qasr, Salah, and all that, I'm talking about going from here to the Far East. You lose 2 days. When you come back the same day. The rules of namaz. Obviously, you pray on the plane, but when you arrive at your destination, it's 2 days later. Now you get those days back. So how does that work?
It's 1 day. Is it 2 days?
No, it's 2 days to the Far East. It's 2 days.
I know you cross the international date line. Yeah, but
a lot of times you
can
arrive
only
2
pray
days later.
according to the time zone that you are in. So yeah, you can lose 1 day many a time. I know I've flown from here to New Zealand or Australia, and I've lost a day. But you only pray according to the time zone that you are in.
So you don't make up that day?
No, you don't have to make up. And when you come back here, I would check on that, but I don't believe you have to make up. I can check on it if you like. I want to be sure before I say. And when you come back here, I remember leaving New Zealand in the afternoon, and I came back here, it was Sunday morning, same day morning.
Correct.
I just left in the afternoon and I arrived in the morning, same day.
Thank you. Yes, I would love if you could confirm.
Yeah, okay. We'll do that.
Still quite a few questions. And then people can vote the questions up. So this one is popular too while we're speaking of things like this. So if I still have makeup fasts to do from Ramadan, but I want to fast on the day of Arafah, does that fast count as a makeup or a mustahab fast?
Yeah, if you have a makeup or qadha fast, you can fast on the day of Arafat or any other day, for example, but with the intention this is qadha, making up. So you get the thawab of fasting on Arafat, but also that you are making up a fast, which is wajib.
Okay, what is Islam's perspective on depression? Is it seen as a problem with someone's deen or nafs, or is it considered a test from Allah?
Depression, it's seen as some kind of illness. Just like you may have physical ailment, some people have mental ailment. It's not necessarily a punishment or a test. If that case, if we apply that principle that anybody who's sick is being punished by Allah. Well, most of us get sick from one time, in one form or another, at one time or another. I think that part of our problem is that we have never really understood depression or even tried to understand it. It's seen, it's almost shunned, it's a stigma, we don't talk about it. I remember I gave a lecture last year in Toronto about mental depression, and it was well received because people say nobody ever talks about it. We do need to talk about it, and we need to find out solutions behind it. Because many a time our people go to non-Muslim therapists, and of course their way of doing things may not necessarily become ours. We need to train our youth, our people, to study psychotherapy, to become experts in counseling. I think that's the solution.
I'm back. So earlier in your lecture today, you mentioned a youth who their father sent them to Pakistan every summer to become more Islamic, but what you said was actually becoming more Pakistani. So regarding that, how can we differentiate what's a cultural tradition or value between what's an actual Islamic practice or ruling that we must uphold?
You know, I have a way of answering difficult questions, like next question. No, it's a very good question. You see, what we have to understand is that every community has got culture, and there's nothing wrong in that. You know, we have Pakistani culture, Iranian, Afghani, and so on. There's nothing wrong in that, but as long as that culture does not conflict with Islam or does not go against Islam, many a time what we are doing is we are conflating different cultures. So you go have a Pakistani practicing Islam according to their understanding, matam or food or whatever, and you have Africans or Indonesians doing it differently. See, sometimes I found, with all due respect, that the Pakistani understanding is more emotional, more cultural. I'm not making a generalized statement here, but I found that in my own experience. So they are more concerned with, matam karo, at the time of namaz, they would rather do matam than pray. Now, of course, matam is a part of ibadat, but prayer is far more important than particular matam, and praying on time in particular. See, we saw that Imam Hussein prayed on time on the day of Ashur. So these are the kind of things that I think sometimes we have to make adjustments to. And this idea of Zari room, okay, we pay respect to the symbols, but sometimes people go so far as to pray in the Zari room towards the Zari. We pray only towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we do that, we're giving an opportunity to outsiders to say that no, you people are praying towards the Zari. We pray only to Allah. So you want to pray there, but make sure that you're facing the Qibla. We have enough people who are accusing and pointing fingers at us. We must never give them opportunity to say that we are going against Islam.
Not all the Pakistanis do that.
I agree. Some of them do that, but not all. I agree 100%. But I've seen them do that. And I've told them that you have to be very careful. I know what your intention is pure inside, but do not give a chance to others to say or point fingers at us.
Dr. Takim, I'm going to actually read a question because I think this is a good question.
Okay.
It's not mine, but I'm just telling you up front. How do I rectify my understanding of the measurable, objective world with immeasurable spirituality that conflicts with established understanding by experimental evidence?
Can you translate that? It sounds Chinese to me.
I basically think what it's saying is, yet you have objective evidence that does not match with your spirituality belief. How do you align with that?
What kind of evidence are we talking about which does not measure? You see, you can not measure spirituality. Spirituality is something very internal, subjective, something that there's no barometer to measure spirituality with an external objective. I don't know if that is the question, whether you can measure spirituality. Is that what they're asking?
I mean, there are things like
Tachometer. You don't have a tachometer. You have a speedometer.
In our daily prayer, 5 times we recite the Dua Kunut on second rakah. But in the Jummah prayer, we do 2 times Kunut. What's the difference?
The difference is Jummah is a different kind of prayer, as we know. It replaces the Dhuhr. And therefore, according to the Hadith, first of all, Qunut is not wajib. It's not part of the namaz. You can recite it, you can even omit it. But based on the Hadith that we have, that the Imams have taught us, that Jummah, because it is different kind of prayer, you have a special dispensation of reciting Qunut in both of them. Just like in Eid, for example, we recite how many Qunuts? Eid namaz? 9 of them, right? 5 in the first rakah, 4 in the second. So based on the traditions of the Imams, that's what we follow.
This one also got upvoted a lot. THC or CBD?
Sorry?
CBD, basically like a medical marijuana
Okay,
or marijuana products.
Synthetic marijuana.
Yeah.
Synthetic marijuana.
Are chemicals that help with a variety of health issues like pain relief and depression. Are these permissible in the circumstances mentioned?
If it is used for medical purposes, and if it is a requirement, if it's absolutely necessary, then yes. But if it is not, as long as there is no possibility of a person being addicted to it, because some of them can be addictive, but as long as it's not addictive and is essential or requirement for a particular ailment, then yes, in that particular circumstance.
Another popular one is, how can I improve my focus during namaz?
I think part of our problem is that we do not emphasize meditation. Meditation is very important because it helps to stabilize and even control the mind. One of the most difficult part is to control the mind, because the mind, as it says, like a monkey, is always moving around. So it is possible to, for example, fixate during meditation, to fix your mind on a particular thing, on the name of Allah, for example, or on the Kaaba, and you'll find the mind will move away, try and bring it back until you are able to do that. And that can be done, by the way. It takes quite a bit of effort, and it is better to get it done, to do it actually in a social congregation than on your own. So dhikr becomes an important way of meditating. Sometimes you need silent meditation, sometimes you do it communally together, but it certainly is possible. And another thing that you need during prayers, if you want to focus, is peace and quietness. Many times we have so many gadgets and notifications and phones, etc. All of that should go, and pray with complete poise and calmness. It's as if nothing else matters but you and your Allah, and you'll find it'll come. It won't be there immediately, but pray slowly. What is the hurry? We're always in a hurry to do things, including myself. But if you find that if you pray slowly, peacefully, with poise, you are able to concentrate far more. And your prayers will become very meaningful, by the way. It's not just a ritual that is just performed. It will become extremely meaningful. And you'll find, I hate to use the word, but it is used, ecstasy, not the kind of that people talk about, but ecstasy in terms of spiritual bliss. You know, it's very difficult to describe it, but it is there. I think the president has walked in with a particular message. It's time to go. Right?
Start tomorrow's business right now.
That's not a bad idea. Then you can recite tomorrow's majlis.
Okay, do we have time for one last question?
Corey, carry on.
Okay. I'm going to go with the most popular one here. So, to what extent should we as Shia go to unify with the Ahl Sunnah, especially during this time when we are under attack and a significant minority?
Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam used to tell his companions that go and visit them, that is the Ahl Sunnah. Pray behind them. When they are sick, go and visit them. When someone of them dies, go with the janazah also. And exhibit the best traits and character so that the people say that, look how Jafar as-Sadiq has trained his disciples. Okay? A lot of, I think the majority of the Sunnis are very good, peaceful, loving people. There is a small group, the fundamentalists, who do a lot of selfies, they call the Salafis. Those are the problematic ones. But the majority are very peaceful, but a lot of them also are ignorant. We Shias, I think, partly responsible for that because we want to preserve our boundaries rather than extend them. In other words, we don't go and talk to them. As I think I said in one of my lectures, that we do more of interfaith dialogue than intra-faith dialogue. We hardly talk with Sunnis, and a lot of them have got these ideas which are given to them by the Imams or by the websites that we have a different Quran, I don't know, we worship Ali and so on, which we do not, or we pray to the Imams. But we need to explain to them. Just to give you an example, last year I was teaching a course, a new course, called Introduction to Islamic Law, okay? And we were discussing Malik, one of the Imams of the Sunnis. And the question was, he was asked by Al-Mansur, who was the Caliph of the time, that when you are asking from the Prophet, and you are in Medina, which way will you face? The Zari is on the left, and the Qibla is on the right, or right in front of you. Which way will you face when you are asking something from the Prophet? And he says, you turn towards the Zari. And this is Maliki law. And they do not know it again. So I think that we need to explain to a lot of them are just either naive or ignorant about Islam. As I said in one of my majlis, my students, Sunnis majority, don't know about Ghadir, they've never heard of Saqifa, they don't know anything about the pen and paper, they don't know a lot about Islamic history. And when I talk to them, they are shocked. Say, how come we don't know it? Give you another example, one quick example. I was talking about the Battle of the Jamal, in the role of Aisha. And a student wrote to me, says, this was totally wrong. I said, why? No, the mother of the faithful, Aisha, never led a battle. So I said, what was she doing in Jamal then? Oh, she went there to bring peace. She was actually heading the battle. She was urging the people. But it's distortion of history. And we need to explain to them of what actually happened. And many other things. Yes.
Just a follow-up question on what you just referenced. Are there any resources that you can suggest, especially for our youth, to refer to have language, to have these conversations?
To have language?
To be able to speak to that, to what you just said. Are there any resources?
I think the main one that I can think of immediately is alislam.org, not alislam.com, alislam.org, which is a Shia site, which has a lot of information, a lot of resources, and you can ask questions on there. Sometimes, I don't know if they have an issue of ask an alim or something, but that is one. And there are many other Shia sources on this. Today, ChatGPT or Google or whatever has a lot of information on this. But The best way is to speak to an alim whom you trust and ask them these questions.
I mean, this business of Shias and Sunnis, this is my experience. When I was in Zanzibar, I have a very close friend of mine who was a member, a Sunni. They are brothers. And he leads prayers at some of the small mosques in Zanzibar. In Zanzibar, there are many, many small mosques. I think Liyakat knows about these mosques. And rather than going all the way to the Shia mosque from our hotel, there was a Sunni mosque very close to me, and he would invite me to go there. And I think the niyat is, if you go to this place, is you are there to be closer to Allah. You're not just going there to please somebody else. You're going there to perfect your religion. And it's wonderful. I went to one of these mosques in Pemba, and I went for Juma namaz, and they could tell I was different. First of all, I was an Indian. There were all black people there, but at the end of the prayers, the leader of the place came personally to thank me for attending, and you feel really good about that because you've broken ice. I told him my father used to teach you, blah blah blah, and you just add on to tell Allah that maybe something good will come out. So it's your niyat. Your niyat is the most important.
I don't mind. I can continue another few minutes if they have any questions.
Okay. One more question.
The young youth has a question too.
Oh, there's a.
There was a question, it was to your point, for ChatGPT. There is a Shia GPT now.
It's called Shia what?
It's called Heather AI.
Heather.ai.
And it's launched by a bunch of scholars and people who work together. And it's fed on all the Shia literature we have and other sources, for instance, Sistani.org, etc. So if you have a question, it pulls from those websites. And if it cannot answer it, it says, you should ask an alim.
It's called Haider AI?
Heather.ai.
You said website?
It's a ChatGPT service.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah.
Is there one more? Oh. Yeah, I'll send you the link next time.
It's useful and it's good for people to know it, because, sometimes you have a question immediately and you don't know who to ask.
We have one last question. Yes?
And it's from the youth, so we have to.
We're not splitting chins, are we?
No. But I feel like I'm getting like the bad rap for all of the questions.
I do remember that question.
We still do.
But it's a tough one. At university, there are a lot of LGBTQ people. What do we do if a close friend comes out as gay, or we find out later that a friend is gay? What should we do in that situation?
Are we talking about a friend who is Shia or a Muslim or non-Muslim?
The question doesn't specify.
Okay, I mean, as much as possible, if we can do Amr bil Ma'ruf, that is, tell them that, what they're doing is Islamically improper, we can do it. But if that's why I asked if it's a Muslim or not, because if it's not a Muslim, then you don't even want to talk to them. They might even feel that you are insulting them,
What if they're not Muslim, but
Okay.
they're still a close friend? We
All
don't
right,
want to
so,
lose the friendship.
as long as, thing is, today there are so many of these things happening that we cannot isolate ourselves completely. When I was working in Denver, two of my colleagues were gays, openly gays, These days you don't need to hide anything. They put on the doors, proud to be gay and that kind of stuff, see. So there's not much that we can do. The most we can do, as long as we do not get influenced by their lifestyle, their sexual orientation. It's just like the alcohol question in many ways. We cannot isolate ourselves completely from them, but we must make absolutely sure that we do not get influenced by them. And if somebody is a Muslim and you think that he or she will listen to you, then you need to talk to them. But if you think that they are not and is going to rebound and be against you, then if you feel that you can isolate yourselves, fine. But it's not always easy or possible. You know, you have people who are not just friends, but who's your boss, for example, or who are in your workplace, and you have to interact with them. Sorry, you had a
follow-up for that. What if they invite you to their wedding? Do you go or don't?
No, definitely not. No, because that would be endorsing it. You know, sometimes I've known people who said, "But my nephew is gay and he's invited me for a wedding." You cannot endorse that. You can keep away from that as much as possible, but by going to that event, then you are almost endorsing that it's okay. You can't do that. You know, as I said, you do not endorse the act at all. If you have to interact with them, fair enough, you do that. Because we're living in a culture which now is becoming more and more, you know, accepting of these things. 20, 30 years ago, we never did something, but now a lot of things are happening, unfortunately. And the truth is, a number of our youth are getting influenced by it too. I've known so many youths, not so many, but a few. If we can avoid to befriend them, then yes. But if we have to interact with them, fine. But we should not befriend them.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's wrap up with a loud salawat.
I am impressed by the turnout, I must say. Thank you, Shukran. Thank you, thank you. You guys are working me overtime.
Thank you.